Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 1.
In the late 1990s, a small KFC off a lonely highway in rural Georgia became the subject of whispers that still circulate among the locals. The place was open late, mostly serving truck drivers and travelers passing through, but it gained a reputation for something darker after a string of disturbing incidents. One night, a young man named David stopped there on his way home from a late shift. He remembered pulling into the parking lot and noticing how empty it was, except for a single car parked at the far edge, its headlights on, but no one inside. When he walked in, the restaurant was strangely silent. There was no music, no kitchen noise, not even the fryer's hiss, just the buzz of the fluorescent lights overhead. Behind the counter stood an older employee who didn't greet him, just stared with a wide, unblinking smile that felt wrong. David asked for a 2-piece meal, and the man slowly repeated the order back in a voice that sounded too calm, like he was rehearsing lines. When the food came out, David noticed the chicken was oddly pale, almost gray. He thought maybe it was just undercooked, but when he picked it up, the meat gave off a smell that was faintly metallic, like blood. He decided to leave, tossing the bag on the passenger seat. But as he pulled onto the road, he glanced in his rearview mirror and saw the same employee standing outside the restaurant doors, still smiling at him, even though the man hadn't left the counter when David walked out. The next morning, David opened the bag to show his roommate. Inside were not 2 pieces of chicken, but what looked like a small, charred hand. He immediately called the health department, but when officials inspected the KFC that afternoon, they found the kitchen spotless while the freezers fully stocked, and the staff cooperative and confused. No one resembled the strange older man David described. According to the manager, the night crew had only been 2 teenage boys, neither of whom matched the description. That KFC closed down less than a year later after more unsettling reports surfaced. Customers receiving meals with bones that didn't look like chicken, people swearing they saw figures standing in the kitchen that weren't employees, and drivers spotting that same strange car in the lot with headlights glowing but no one inside. To this day, travelers passing through say they can still see the faint outline of the old KFC sign at night, flickering even though the building has long been demolished. Some swear if you pull over and stare at the lot too long, you'll see a pale man smiling at you from the shadows, waiting to hand you something that definitely isn't chicken.
Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 2.
There was a KFC in Ohio that locals whispered about, the kind of place people swore they'd never eat at again after one visit. It looked normal enough on the outside, but something about it always felt off. The lighting inside was dimmer than usual, giving everything a greasy yellow tint. Customers reported that the smell wasn't the usual fried chicken aroma. It was sour, almost rancid, like meat left in the sun too long. A college student named Mark went there late one night after work. He was starving, and it was the only place open. The dining area was empty, except for a man sitting in the corner who didn't seem to move, just staring at the table in front of him. The workers looked exhausted, moving strangely slow, as if they were trying to hide something. Mark ordered a bucket of chicken to go, but when the bag was handed to him, the worker avoided eye contact completely. On the way home, the smell coming from the bucket was different, metallic, almost like blood. When Mark opened it, his stomach twisted. The chicken pieces looked wrong. The skin was pale and rubbery in some spots, blistered in others. One drumstick seemed to have teeth marks in it, as if someone had already taken a bite before it was fried. At the bottom of the bucket, stuck between the chicken, was something unmistakable, a human fingernail, still attached to a fragment of flesh. Horrified, he drove back to the KFC, but when he pulled into the parking lot, the building was pitch dark. No lights, no cars, no one inside. It looked abandoned. Confused, Mark checked his receipt, but there was no store number, no cashier name, not even a timestamp, just a greasy, smudged logo. The next morning, he tried telling friends about it, but when they looked up the location, no KFC had ever existed there. He drove back to the spot where it should have been, and all he found was an empty lot overgrown with weeds. That night, Mark's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was a picture of the same bucket of chicken sitting on his kitchen counter, freshly opened. In the middle of it was a new piece of meat that hadn't been there before. It was a strip of skin that matched the exact scar on his forearm. No matter how many times he blocked the number, the photos kept coming. Each one showing that bucket, each one with more of his own body inside.
Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 3.
There's one KFC story that still unsettles people who work there because it wasn't some internet rumor. It was documented by employees and whispered about by regulars who swore they'd never step inside again. In the early 2000s, a KFC in a small Midwestern town had earned a decent reputation. It wasn't fancy, but it was one of those places where the same workers showed up for years. The same families came in every Friday night, and the same old fryers sizzled nonstop behind the counter. But the building itself had a darker history. Before it became a fast food joint, the lot had been the site of an old auto shop where, in the late 70s, a young mechanic had died in a gruesome accident. Locals claimed he'd been pulled into one of the machines, his body left undiscovered until a co-worker noticed blood seeping across the concrete. When the shop closed down, KFC bought the property and built right over it. The strange incidents started small. Night shift employees reported hearing the back freezer door slam when no one was near it. Buckets of chicken that had just been breaded would suddenly tip over, splattering raw meat across the floor. The manager at the time brushed it off as clumsy workers and late-night paranoia. But the closing crew always said the same thing. No matter how many times they mopped, they'd come in the next morning to find greasy footprints tracked across the kitchen. Bare feet, not shoes. One former cook recalled a night he was scraping out the fryer when he heard someone humming right behind him. He turned, expecting to see one of the cashiers messing with him, but the kitchen was empty. The humming kept going, low and steady, until the fryer timer went off and the sound stopped. The cook quit 2 days later, but the worst incident happened in 2003. A teenage girl had just been hired for her first job. She was asked to clean the walk-in freezer before close. Around midnight, when most of the staff was cleaning up the lobby, they heard her scream. By the time they rushed back, the freezer door was locked from the inside. When they finally got it open, she was on the floor, shaking violently, her face blue from the cold. She kept repeating that someone had been in there with her. A man covered in grease, his hands all burned. She swore he whispered in her ear, "You'll never leave." The girl survived, but she never came back. Her parents threatened to sue, but nothing came of it. Corporate brushed it under the rug, the way they always do. Still, people in town said that after that night, the food at that KFC always tasted a little off. Employees talked about opening buckets of chicken that smelled rancid, even though they were fresh off the delivery truck. Customers complained about getting pieces with long black hairs fried into the crust, even though everyone working the kitchen wore nets. Eventually, enough workers quit that the store couldn't function and the franchise shut down. The building sat empty for years, rotting away until it was finally demolished. But the locals say if you drive past that lot late at night, you'll still smell fried chicken in the air. And if you roll down your windows, you might hear the faint sound of a man humming, muffled under the crackle of oil. And for the people who work those shifts, they'll tell you the same thing. Nothing in that KFC was scarier than the feeling of being watched when you were alone in the back, the fryer hissing, and the sound of bare, wet footsteps padding slowly towards you.
Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 4.
There was a small KFC off a quiet highway in the Midwest, the kind of place truckers stopped late at night and teenagers lingered after football games. On the surface, it looked like any other fried chicken joint, but people in the area whispered about strange things that happened after dark. It started with little stories, employees hearing footsteps in the freezer, machines turning on by themselves, bags of flour bursting open in the stockroom without anyone touching them. Most people brushed it off as nothing until one night, a worker named Jason stayed late for closing. Jason was new, only a few weeks in, and he volunteered to help the manager lock up. By midnight, everyone else had gone home, and it was just him and the hum of the fryers cooling down. He went to the walk-in freezer to check the inventory one last time, and as soon as he stepped inside, the heavy steel door slammed shut behind him. At first, he thought it was a prank, but when he pushed on the handle, it wouldn't budge. The lights overhead flickered, then dimmed until the freezer was barely glowing blue with the emergency bulb. He swore he could hear someone breathing behind the stacked boxes of chicken. He called out, thinking maybe another employee was still there, but no one answered. Instead, he heard a dragging sound, like something wet being pulled across the icy floor. His breath caught in his throat when he saw a trail forming in the frost, dark and sticky, leading between the boxes. He tried to back away, but the more he moved, the colder it got, his skin burning with frostbite in minutes. His phone had no signal inside, so he pounded on the door until his fists bled. But no one came. The next morning, the manager opened up and found the freezer door wide open. Jason's uniform shirt was crumpled in the corner, soaked through with something dark that wasn't blood but smelled rancid, like old grease and rot. His body was never found. Corporate shut the location down within a week, citing plumbing issues, but the locals knew better. To this day, that abandoned KFC sits off the highway, boarded up and covered in weeds. Truckers say if you park nearby at night, you can see the freezer light flicker through the cracks, and sometimes, if the wind dies down, you'll hear the faint pounding on steel, like someone is still trapped inside, begging to be let out.
Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 5.
There's a story that circulates online among fast food workers, and while most people dismiss it as rumor, those who've worked late nights at certain KFCs swear it's true. It happened in the early 2000s at a KFC off a quiet highway in the Midwest. The store was old, with flickering fluorescent lights and a walk-in freezer that always gave off a low hum like it was breathing. The night manager, a young guy named Daniel, had been working there for years and was used to the usual weirdness, drunks stumbling in before close, kids trying to steal buckets of chicken, even the occasional power outage. But what happened one stormy night was different. A heavy rain had rolled in, flooding the parking lot. Business was slow, and only 2 employees were on duty, Daniel and a new hire, a girl named Morgan. Around 10:45 p.m., just before closing, a man walked in. He looked soaked to the bone, wearing a faded jacket and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. He didn't order right away. Instead, he stood at the counter, staring at the menu with an odd stillness. When Daniel asked if he could take his order, the man finally whispered, "Family bucket." His voice was hoarse, almost like he hadn't spoken in days. Daniel rang it up, but when he turned back, the man had disappeared from the counter. Confused, he checked the dining area. Empty. Morgan swore she saw him walk toward the restrooms, but when Daniel checked, both stalls were vacant. Still, the order ticket printed from the machine, and Daniel, assuming the man had stepped outside, went to prepare the food. That's when things started getting strange. As Morgan breaded the chicken, she let out a scream. On the raw chicken skin were deep, human-like scratches, long red lines that hadn't been there moments before. Daniel thought maybe the meat had torn during processing, but the marks looked too deliberate, like fingernail gouges. They tossed the pieces and grabbed fresh ones. When Daniel opened the fryer, he froze. The oil wasn't bubbling, it was still. That was impossible. It had been running all night. He shut the lid and checked the power, but everything else in the kitchen hummed normally. Suddenly, the fryer roared back to life on its own, boiling violently as if something had just been dropped inside. The smell that filled the air wasn't fried chicken. It was something foul, metallic like burning flesh. Morgan backed away, insisting she heard someone whispering inside the walk-in freezer. Against his better judgment, Daniel opened it. The freezer was filled with hanging bags of chicken, all sealed tight, but between them was the man from the counter. His hat was gone, and his eyes were clouded white. His skin bluish and wet like he drowned. He smiled, wide and unnatural, then stepped forward without making a sound. Daniel slammed the freezer door shut and held it. Morgan was sobbing, begging to leave, but when they turned to grab their things, the man was already standing by the counter again. Only this time, his body looked bloated, dripping water onto the floor. He rasped, "Family bucket," louder this time, like a demand. The lights cut out, plunging the place into darkness. Daniel later said he doesn't remember running, only that when he and Morgan came to, they were outside in the rain, gasping for air. The restaurant behind them was dark, silent. When they called the police, officers checked the building and found nothing unusual. No intruder, no broken freezer, no strange fryer smell. Just a completed order ticket on the counter with no name, no number, and the words printed in all caps, "Family Bucket." The KFC closed down a few years later. Employees who worked there in its final months claimed the kitchen never felt right. Freezers opening on their own, fryers shutting off, whispers late at night. Some even said customers would occasionally order a family bucket, but when the food was ready, no one would come to claim it. To this day, truckers who pass the abandoned building on stormy nights say they sometimes see a figure inside, standing at the counter, dripping wet, waiting for his order.
Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 6.
There's one story about KFC that has circulated quietly online, one that never got wide news coverage but lingers in food safety forums and old Reddit threads. It happened in the early 2000s at a KFC in California, and it still unnerves the people who worked there. A young woman named Marissa stopped in late one evening after a long shift at her job. She ordered a 3-piece meal, extra crispy, with mashed potatoes and a biscuit. The place was quiet, just 2 employees working the line. The food came out hot, smelling like the familiar grease and seasoning that kept people coming back despite the rumors about what went on behind the kitchen doors. She sat down, exhausted, scrolling through her phone while she ate. Halfway through her second piece of chicken, she noticed something strange. The meat was unusually rubbery, with veins that didn't look like normal chicken tissue. When she pulled it apart, the texture was wrong, grainy and fibrous. She pushed the piece aside, her stomach turning, but hunger made her keep eating the biscuit and potatoes. Within the hour, while driving home, she felt an intense nausea. By the time she reached her apartment, she was doubled over, vomiting violently. She called her sister, who rushed her to the ER. Doctors assumed it was food poisoning, maybe salmonella. But when they ran tests, they found something bizarre lodged in her throat, a small, hard fragment that had gotten caught while she vomited. It was dark, brittle, almost like a tooth. The hospital sent it for analysis and the results came back inconclusive. Animal in origin, but not chicken. Her family went back to the KFC the next day demanding answers. The employees swore everything came from corporate suppliers, sealed and frozen. But one worker, a teenager who had just quit, admitted something unsettling. He said the manager often cut corners on waste. If raw chicken was dropped on the dirty floor, it was picked up, battered again, and fried to cover it. Sometimes, shipments came in with strange growths or tumors in the meat, and they fried those up too, hoping no one would notice once it was coated in herbs and spices. Marissa's family tried to push for an investigation, but corporate lawyers shut it down. They claimed she couldn't prove the bone fragment came from them. The health department did a brief inspection, found nothing violating standards, and closed the case. But people in town kept whispering about that KFC, about customers who got sick, about meat that sometimes came out with rubbery textures, about tendons that looked too human. Employees swore they saw boxes with misprinted labels, meat that wasn't chicken but got fried anyway. Eventually, the location shut down abruptly, supposedly due to remodeling. It never reopened. Marissa never fully recovered. She still has digestive issues and swears she can't eat fried chicken anymore. To this day, she insists that what she bit into that night wasn't chicken at all. And the most disturbing part? The official report that came back from the hospital didn't just say unknown animal origin. It noted that the tissue bore similarities to mammalian muscle fiber. And that's why some people refuse to eat at certain KFCs, because sometimes the thing in the bucket isn't exactly what you think it is.
Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 7.
There's one story that has been whispered about among fast food employees for years, and it centers around a KFC in the Midwest. The restaurant looked like any other. Red and white stripes, the smell of fried chicken hanging heavy in the air, and a constant flow of customers eager for a bucket of hot wings. But in 2005, during a sweltering July, something happened in that location that still unsettles anyone who worked there at the time. The night shift had just started when an employee named Mark went down to the freezer in the back. The freezer door had been jamming for weeks, sticking slightly whenever someone tried to open it, so it wasn't unusual when his coworkers noticed it taking him longer than normal. But minutes stretched into nearly an hour, and Mark didn't come back. At first, the manager thought maybe he had stepped outside for a smoke break, but his car was still in the parking lot and no one had seen him leave. The staff went back to the freezer, tugged the heavy door open, and found the light inside flickering. The room was empty. The unsettling part wasn't that Mark wasn't there. It was what they found on the frosted floor. His KFC-issued hat, the brim curled upward, sat neatly in the middle of the room, and next to it was a fresh handprint pressed into the ice on one of the metal shelves. It looked like he had slammed his palm against it before vanishing. The staff tore apart the freezer in the back storage area, thinking maybe he collapsed or passed out. But he was simply gone. No exit, no trail, no sound of the heavy door opening and closing. Police were called, security cameras reviewed. The footage made the employee's blood run cold. Mark could be seen pushing the door open, stepping inside the freezer, and then nothing. He didn't come back out. No one else entered. Just static on the camera for 3 minutes. Then the feed resumed, showing the freezer door slightly ajar, hat on the floor. For weeks, the restaurant tried to carry on, but the staff started hearing things. Knocking from inside the freezer, whispering when the door was shut, and on one occasion, the night manager swore he heard Mark's voice calling his name from the back when the building was locked and empty. Customers complained about a foul smell in the dining area, like raw chicken left in the sun, though health inspectors never found anything spoiled. The freezer door continued to malfunction, slamming shut without warning, sometimes trapping workers inside for a few seconds before releasing them. Eventually, corporate shut the location down. The official reason given was equipment issues and staff shortages, but those who worked there know the truth. Mark was never found, no trace, no body, nothing. Even more disturbing, when the building was demolished 2 years later, the demolition crew reported something chilling. The inside walls of the freezer were covered with handprints, dozens of them, all frozen into the steel. To this day, some former employees refuse to eat at KFC at all, and when asked why, they always give the same answer: because you never know what's waiting in the freezer.